Akmans here, Supply Network Dynamics Chapter 5, Part 5, the 2000 demand bubble. The year 2000 was a wonderful year for many people in the electronics and telecom industry. We've looked at some of these examples, but we'll be seeing more examples from various industries. When it stopped, this blissful period, it created a demand shock. There was first a demand shock going up and then a demand shock going down again. In ASML, it was all the more drastic because what, as I already pointed out earlier on, we should realize is that ASML is just part of a much bigger supply network where many other players also make their own independent decision. It of course has multiple other customers. It has some competitors, but let's forget about these in these times of scarcity that we look at. But the customers make up their own mind. But let's not forget that the supply base is also huge. So it's just 1/20 of the actual capacity planning has to be done by ASML. All the rest is done by suppliers, and not just the first tier suppliers, but also the second tier and even third tier suppliers. There'd be an example of cable suppliers, for instance, that of both first, second and third tier suppliers. And that makes it very difficult to directly streamline the supply chain to handle such a major change in the end market or for IC companies that actually, electronics companies that use ICs in their machines. These customers are the IC manufacturers. And you don't have control over the end market, but you don't have control over the customers also. Now here is a very illustrative graph that shows what happens when there's capacity shortages. Let's just look at this period of January 2000 to 2001. What you then see is that for the entire industry, the green line, the highest line also, is the booking. So the new orders that were booked every month for new lithography machines. And the gray ones are the shipments. And what you see is that throughout 2000 there were more bookings than there were shipments. So the book-to-bill ratio in this industry was definitely way above 1. And that's logical because it's just impossible to have as much capacity as is needed when you have these very high demands. Also notice that throughout 2001 and a lot of 2002, the bookings were a lot lower than the shipments. These shipments, where do they come from? Well, from the bookings from last year. So this whole part over which is not servable, not deliverable in 2000, ends up being delivered in 2001. And what was the mood beginning 2001? Well, if you believe the analyst, and you should never, but if you believe the analyst, then the times were great. They were predicting in January 11, and this is a slide collected at the time by people at ASML that they carefully kept. A very positive 2000 plus 44, but 2001 also 36% growth, and even up to 2002. Remember this one because we'll be seeing it a bit later on. But what happened? Well, up here, in 2000, first the mood was very positive. I have included some of the Dow Jones headlines from this. ASML gets more orders, and if you look at the official semiconductor slides there, then you see that this comes from the official trade statistics on supply networks, on the semiconductor industry. And you see that there was a very strong decline of the book-to-bill ratio up here already. So this one refers basically to this period around here in the middle. Then you have in the beginning of 2000 that the ASML results beginning of 2001 are even better than what the analysts thought they would be. And in fact, the quote by Doug Dunn, the CEO of ASML at that time, was that in the beginning of 2001, after a very successful year of very high demand, well, we've seen customer demand soften somewhat, but we see unchanging strong demand. So again, in January 2001, the strong belief was that this would be again a very good year. But well, shortly afterwards, in March of 16, ASML had to lower its forecast because actually the good days were over. And a little bit later, in July, they predicted a firm first half net loss as the revenue dropped further. And then in October they had to cut some 1,400 jobs. And what you should remember is that as ASML only manufactures a small percentage of the total product, say 1/20%, that probably 20 times that number of jobs were lost in its supply network, which makes it a big impact indeed as a result of this planning. And you could have seen it coming somewhere in the year 2000. Now, what would have happened if they would have reacted sooner? Oh, and of course, when the times were bad again, here's April 2001, then the market analysts predict a sharp decline. So this is really asking for an umbrella during the good times, but then wanting it back when it's raining. So that wasn't all that helpful. What's the underlying mechanism? The underlying mechanism of this is that you have some real demand up there. Here is the backlog of the ASML people, of the OEM. And because in the times of scarcity, the MRP logic amplifies that the shortages, there's a lot more in demand, but also in the end you have some speculative customer demand. And all these demands compound upon one another. And that keeps on happening until the cumulative orders placed, the real demand, is actually more, just as much as what they have received in shipments. So they needed 5 a month, they ordered 10 a month. It took a very long time, but after a while, in the end, they had as much as 5 per month on average. And then the whole bubble inflates, because then you get cancellations, or in the case of ASML, more often delays. Customers delay their orders rather than cancel it, because they know they will be around in 5 years' time. And new orders don't happen at all, because people have enough. Now this is a model which was made by Paulo Gonçalves, a fellow researcher from MIT and nowadays from Lugano, who wrote his PhD thesis on this, and his topic was Cisco, a similar case, also an equipment manufacturer for, in this case, the telecom industry, still is, and they also had a huge fall in earnings and stock price in beginning of 2001. Now, did the industry learn? Yes, they did learn. Here's a graph from 10 years later. From 2010. So the next downturn around the credit crisis up here. You see in 2001 that the number of days worth of inventory, the green solid stuff, was very high there. Sorry, the inventory days is the blue lines. Very high number there, more than 100 days worth of inventory, because the green line is the actual numbers of inventory. Now this is what went wrong then also in 2001. These companies were just too optimistic, had too much inventory. And now I'm not talking about the ASMLs, but the ASML customers, the IC manufacturers. So the Philips Semiconductors, if you like. In 2008, their stock levels were much lower. Well, much lower, still pretty low. But what is the main difference there is that they corrected much quicker in the demand for new ICs. And well, companies like ASML had, as a result, a very, very vicious 2009, but they bounced back much quicker than they did in 2002 and 2003. So the whole supply network had become much more agile, much more versatile in adjusting to demand changes. And also, interestingly, they've become quite a bit less open towards the market in terms of sharing information.